The government may have to shelve one of its most effective tools in the fight against terrorism. A federal judge has ruled it's unconstitutional for the Treasury Department to freeze the assets of charities that are under investigation for aiding terrorists. So what will this mean for U.S. counterterrorism efforts? Joining us now is intelligence expert and author of Vanished, Joseph Fender. Thank you so much, Joseph, for joining us today. And
Hi, Shannon. Good to be here.
I got to start by asking you, tell us how often it is that these charities are used as fronts.
Well, in the U.S., charities are used, but not that often. The government's really only shut down, I think, 8 charities for funding terrorists. It's not even a huge percentage of the funding of terrorism, but it's one. This whole program is one of the few ways the Treasury has to try to choke off terrorist financing, and this is the first time a judge in the U.S. has ever shut down those efforts. So it's part of a trend that's, I think, really interesting and troubling.
And I know this ruling came from a federal district court, the most basic level. It's certain, I would imagine, to go to an appeal. But in the meantime, if they lose this tool, how important is it in trying to shut down terrorist operations here in the U.S.?
Well, I think it's important I think it's an important tool. My feeling is that this is part of a program that was put into effect under an executive order, a kind of an emergency order, right after 9/11. And it's important and we need it. But basically, we're seeing a pushback on the part of the courts here. What's going to happen is that Treasury is simply going to have to modify the rules. Here's the basic problem, and it's a really difficult one. The evidence that Treasury has about this group, this charity in Columbus, Ohio, which they think is funding Hamas, the terrorist group, the evidence they have is classified. The intelligence community will not declassify that, so the charity is unable to look at the evidence. They can't defend themselves, and that's a tough issue, and they don't have the money to hire lawyers because we've shut them down without even saying for sure whether they are a terrorist group.
And Joseph, you mentioned there may have been much more of an appetite for doing this kind of thing after 9/11, especially when emotions were running high and the need to protect ourselves was very important. Do you think that other court cases like this, other programs beyond what we have at the Treasury, are also going to face this bit of backlash now that we've cooled off a bit from 9/11?
Yeah, it's also an interesting trend. This will not be the last time. I think this is the first of a whole series of court decisions in which judges are going to say, hey, wait a second, the government can't just go after terrorists and terrorist financing without following due process. That means that, we are all, in a sense, looking at what happened right after 9/11, and a lot of people are saying, well, the emergency is over now. Now we have to start following due process. And like it or not, this is starting to happen, and the government is going to have to refine the tools and basically say, all right, if we have to work within the legal system and get probable cause, we're not going to be able to rely on completely classified evidence. So how do we do this? It's a problem that needs to be solved. I think it will be fixed, but it shows that there's a relaxation, I think, of concern, and that's not, I think we're going too far in the other direction.
Certainly the game is changing. Joseph Fender, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.